All right. Hey, everyone. How's it going? My name is Mike Scudo. I'm a physical therapist at Champion PT and Performance. I'm here tonight to have a conversation with a bunch of former students at Champion PT, and we're going to talk about current concepts in physical therapy, specifically related to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. So we have Drew Dudek, went to Belmont University. We have Trey Martin, went to East Tennessee State University. Brooks Klein went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV Running Rebels. Shelley went to Augusta University, not affiliated with Augusta National. Just going to throw that out there. And who am I forgetting? Nick. I still don't know how to say her last name, but he went to Duke University. So a man after my own heart. I'm a big Duke fan myself. So an awesome group of students. You guys may recognize most of them from the Ask Mike Ronald podcast, where they kind of sat in the back and asked us some questions. But I thought it was an awesome time to get them all involved and share their experience, kind of what they've been going through as PTs. They're all kind of in different stages of their careers. Some are PT students on their clinical rotation. Bo is currently with us as a clinical student. He's had an interesting experience so far. It's been very different than past students that we've had. And then Brooks and Shelley and Drew are kind of a little bit further out in their career, a couple of years into practicing, working in different settings. And then Nick kind of recently graduated and is going through the whole board exam process right now, which has been kind of disrupted pretty heavily by all of this. So I think they have a really unique perspective on the current crisis and how it's affecting physical therapy as a profession, and particularly how it's affecting the job market and different aspects of what we do as physical therapists. There are a lot of things that are going on in society right now that are being reflected in how we care for patients, particularly taking extra safety precautions and things like that. At Champion, we typically have 2 to 3 students going at a time, and right now we just have one, which is great. I will admit that I'm a little less motivated to kind of spend a whole lot of time teaching, which I usually like to do, is spend a lot of time with students, but it's a little bit tougher. So I don't know. Bo and Nick, I guess kind of the first question for you guys, like you guys have gone through a clinical experience throughout all of this. Like how has your experience been going through a clinical, and kind of take us through your journey? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I'll start if you don't mind.
Sure.
So mine was kind of interesting because when I started, I guess it was the end of January when I started at Champion. None of this was, that prevalent at all, and it was totally normal. And then I was supposed to end mid-April, but I got cut short a month, pretty much. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. So it was just interesting to see, like, when all the pandemonium kind of ramped up, like I was there for it all. And then my school ended up shutting us down and sending us home. So it sucked that I missed out on a whole month being a Champion. But I think, like you were saying, Mike, we not part of Champion, but when I was there, you guys ramped up all the, cleaning. We were cleaning stuff multiple times a day, deep clean of the gym, the HIPAA cleanse for the hands, washing in and out. And I think towards the end of my rotation, we started to see the patients kind of realize what was going on and how serious it was, and either didn't come as much, stopped coming. And I think you guys made sure to give really good home plans and make sure everyone was still, continuing with the high quality care. But yeah, it was just interesting because I saw like normalcy, and then kind of went down pretty hard, and then I had to leave early, which sucked. But
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of right in the middle of your studentship that like things were changing day by day, and no one really knew like what was going on. And so we were just kind of literally watching the news in the clinic, like, oh, we might be shut down tomorrow, or we might have to close in the next couple of days. So like you kind of weathered that storm, and eventually the school kind of pulled you out. And I don't know, have you guys heard of any other schools that lets clinical students stay at their sites throughout this?
everyone that I know who was in one at the time left, or was asked to leave, I think. And I don't know. I think Mac might have stayed, right? But I think everyone pretty much left from what I know. I know we were given that week, and we were supposed to leave on Friday, which I did. So yeah, everyone I talked to, pretty much that was their last week.
Yeah. How about Drew or Shelley? Do you guys have clinical students at the clinics that you guys work at?
Yeah,
We
actually, go ahead.
but
Yeah, we actually had all of our students. We had two students at the time. Neither one of them were pulled out. So it was one of them stayed through the whole thing. He started about 12 weeks ago and he just finished last week. His school kind of gave their students an option on if they wanted to continue. They basically just signed the waiver on knowing what they were putting on risk and how that would affect their clinicals going on from there. But he stayed the whole time and didn't have any problems, and I felt like if anything it was a good learning experience for him because we did end up switching over to some telehealth, so he was able to get some experience with that. So I feel like pros and cons to being pulled out versus staying, but I feel like he actually got a pretty cool learning experience through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And telehealth was kind of like the buzzword for the first couple of months throughout all this. So it's definitely it's telehealth in general. I've done a little bit of it. It's not something that we do a ton of at Champion, even throughout this. But it's definitely different, and it's definitely like a learning curve to kind of get used to interacting with patients in that way. But I think it can be effective, and I think we as PTs sometimes we sell ourselves short and think that there's like we can't do as much as we can through telehealth. And I think we can have a really big impact on people's lives through telehealth and really make a positive impact. Drew, you guys do any telehealth out of Axis?
yeah, we kind of were a little late to the game. So some of the people that were canceling because of everything going on, because we're still kind of a newer company, so we didn't have. I mean, I guess everybody's kind of new to telehealth, but in the beginning, whenever we were trying to tell patients or patients were calling us that they wanted to cancel because of everything going on, we didn't have that option yet. But some people, when we finally had the option, we told them they were, all for it. Some, your older patients, because I'm in general outpatient orthopedics, the older patients didn't feel comfortable with it. They kind of, older people get with stuff like that in technology in general. But the people that I did it with actually really enjoyed it, and they enjoyed being able to do it from home. And, we got the same amount of stuff done besides the hands-on treatment. But most of the people that did it, appreciated it and enjoyed it.
Yeah. How did you manage? Were you basically educating them on certain things and then observing them do their home exercise program and their Therax and stuff like that? Or did you do it in a different way? You send them like a program with videos and then just kind of use the telehealth time to just talk and educate and kind of catch up?
So in the beginning, I'd always kind of go over kind of a couple things I talk about them to them about what's been bothering them, how's it been going. And then I would have them go through just a couple exercises and kind of visualize a couple range of motion things. So if it was knee or shoulders, have them go through their motion real quick. And then I'd kind of progress. I wouldn't have them do a ton of their home exercise program. I still kind of program my workouts like Champion does with blocks. So I kind of would do it like that and have a couple of different exercises we'd circuit through a little bit, and then kind of go from there. Try to progress them as much as possible. That way they felt they had, good amount of progression. So like I said, they enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's a good way to do it. And it was a little bit out of necessity, but I think it goes to show that we as PTs, maybe we can advocate for ourselves a little bit more in the future. We can start incorporating some of these things that we learned into practice. I think there will always be a need for in-person physical therapy and hands-on treatment and having PT clinics open. But I think telehealth can play a role in the future of PT. I think that's only going to be beneficial for the profession at large. Brooks, I know you kind of work in pro sports. How has it been kind of contacting and managing athletes that you work with who were actually preparing for a season kind of right when all this started to happen? And what was your message to them, and how have you been talking them through it?
Yeah, it feels similar to the off season. So I started minor league PT for the White Sox and started in August of last year. So I kind of caught the tail end of season, and then it was kind of a similar role. We had rehab guys here until maybe October, November, and then it was similar setup when guys went home for the holidays. So it seems like it's almost back to that role. But now it's like we kind of have to adjust there. We know what our timeline is. Like our plan is, if you're ready to go for spring training, like when we want to ramp up, when your first game is going to be, and it's much more detailed. And now it's to the point where it's, we're waiting to see what happens with this proposal that we've got. We'll see. There's going to be like a taxi squad, how many guys on the roster, how many players are going to be allowed in the facility. So it's really just been a lot of unknowns. So maybe guys who we would have tried to maybe work a little bit faster through their rehab. Now it's, let's draw it out a little bit more, give you the best chance to feel as good as you can get, perform at your best, and then kind of keep you at maybe not your game workload, but a workload you'd be at coming into spring training.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, and with so much uncertainty, in pro sports, if you turn on the news, they're kind of talking about when are sports going to return. No one really knows the answer. No one really knows what it's going to look like, and it's easy to just, as a fan of sports, to just be like, oh, we want these athletes to come back. But from behind the scenes, realizing what it takes to get these athletes ready to perform, especially pro athletes, but all athletes, at a high level, and try to mitigate the risk of injury upon return is really a big undertaking. So there's a lot of things, a lot of people working behind the scenes trying to keep these athletes at a point where if they get the call, it says we're starting in a month, we're starting in 8 weeks, whatever, that they're going to be somewhat ready. And that's not easy to do, especially when you've kind of been flying blind for a couple months now. So. All right, let's talk about another hot topic I've been reading in the PT student section, is kind of talking about the board exam and the struggles that people have been going through trying to schedule their board exam and trying to sit at these testing facilities to take it. So we just had the April boards, I believe. I don't know, Nick and Bo, you guys are Nick, do you take the boards yet?
I take it Tuesday.
Took it on Tuesday.
No, I take it Tuesday coming up.
Oh, so you're nervous right now?
Yeah, I'm sure.
But you're gonna do fine. I mean, Brooks passed, Drew passed, Shelly passed, so you'll be all right. What's that process been like? And Bo, feel free to chime in as well. I'm sure you're taking the boards maybe in July.
Yeah, so I'm scheduled to take it at the end of July, and as far as I'm aware of right now, they're trying to talk about adding additional testing slots, so it's not quarterly throughout the year or to finish up the year. But I know a lot of my friends are starting to kind of get worried about, is there going to be a backlash? Are there going to be in limited amount of seats? But something I talked to our director about actually is some schools that already did poll their students, they're not going to be able to meet their criteria for CAP3 of getting their full-time clinical requirement hours. And the requirement right now is 28 weeks. So like for our school, we're allowed to be out in clinic. Our school didn't poll, but some schools completely took out all their students, and their semesters are actually getting pushed back into this upcoming fall semester with the hopes that those clinical hours can be attained at that time. So in actuality, when people are thinking that there may be less opportunity to get a seat, there actually might be a better chance to get seats right now, because like the schools that are still allowing students to be in clinic, they're going to be right on track with their normal. But something else that I've noticed is quarantine and all this COVID stuff has actually been a blessing in disguise for a lot of students, because they're like not in clinical for as long like you and I are. And it's actually providing opportunity to study more often. So it's kind of a win-win situation as far as like getting the board scheduled and having a seat reserved for you, and also getting additional study time that you might have to balance a little bit more with a full caseload and clinical hours. So
Yeah, I think it sounds like there's kind of two types of schools, and none in my mind is better or worse than the other. Schools that have kind of pulled everyone out, and schools that are just letting kids go in with extra safety precautions. So yeah, so I guess what you're saying is that schools are delaying graduation um, to push it back a semester and have their students finish their clinical when things kind of calm down a little bit. And then those students would take the board exam at another time after they graduate or in the fall or something like that. That will expand the number of tests that they give. I've had this conversation with a lot of students, maybe Nick, maybe Shelly, maybe Brooks, maybe all of you actually. One of the things that we see a lot of is students that want to take the board exam before they graduate. And that often means that they're studying during their final clinical. And so for some people, that's really a daunting task. If you're in the clinic for 40 plus hours and studying for the board exam, and you have to take that test potentially in the middle of your clinical rotation, that's a lot of stress to manage. And at Champion, we really want students to get the most out of their clinical. And sometimes for some students, they handle it a little bit better if they're studying for the boards and they're able to kind of participate. Some students are a little bit, need to work on their stress management or time management a little bit. So we often encourage students to, maybe not take the board exam while they're still on their clinical, so they don't have to study during that last clinical. And then when they graduate, they take some time to study and they have a little bit more spare time. They don't have to stress as much. And then maybe in the long-term financial outlook of your entire life, those extra 3 months of working as a PT won't be that significant. For some people, it may be. For people that need to pay off loans quickly, that may be a pretty significant time. But I know that's a conversation that I have with a lot of students, like when they come in. Nick, you got anything to add to the board exam debacle?
Been a debacle for sure. I mean, everyone's got canceled in April, we know, and then so right when registration opened up to start in May, I hopped on like right away and got one for the 26th, which I was happy about because I figured if there's going to be the best chance of taking it, it's going to be at the end of the month or when there's more time to figure out the whole COVID situation. But so mine hasn't been canceled for the 26th yet, at least, knock on wood. But I've had classmates who've had their dates canceled like 5 or 6 times, showed up to the testing center the morning of their supposed test and the building's closed, and like no notification from Prometric or anything like that, the testing center. So it's been a mess. And I think it just kind of emphasizes the importance of communication, which Prometric isn't doing. So if there's one thing to take from it, just be a better communicator and be open and honest and upfront. I think that helps people be more understanding. But yeah, it's been a mess, but it is what it is. It's not like anyone's gone through a pandemic before, so we don't really know how to handle things. So you just got to do what you got to do and roll with the punches, really.
Yeah, that's true. Trey, I know you've written blog posts and talked about preparing for the board exam and kind of shared your experience taking the board exam on your website and on your Instagram and stuff like that. Like, do you have any advice for students right now that have so much uncertainty around the board exam?
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't worry as much about it as you think. You can study as much as you want. When you get to boards, section 1, you're going to feel like you got hit with a ton of bricks. You're going to be like, I don't know where this came from. This doesn't make sense. And then somehow you'll wind up getting a really good score. It's not as bad as you think it probably is. But be prepared for post-test day shock. Like Mike referenced, I wrote a blog about it. The day after boards, I was like, God, I failed that. I just got crushed. So I wrote my thoughts down in a blog post, and I was like, man, there's no way that I did well with that. And then, it winds up being a better experience than you think. So I would say make sure you take the P seriously, go through every single question you get right or wrong, and then have a good answer for why you missed something or why you didn't. That was probably the most helpful. Learning the rote memorization is not going to help you a ton. So think through your thought processes, figure out why things are right and wrong, go through each answer choice, and that's probably the best. But overall, I wouldn't sweat it that much. I mean, you got this far, you got a doctorate degree, you're smart enough to pass boards. Most people do. Ride the odds.
Yeah, for students that like the timeline keeps getting pushed back, like do you have any thoughts on what they should spend the extra time doing? Should they take more practical exams? Should they, do other things when they're studying? Like, what do you think would be the most helpful?
I mean, it depends. If you've already burned your Pete's, that's kind of tough. Those are obviously the most valuable, but for me, and I think it depends on what got you through PT school. If you're not a big time stress studier, then don't become one now. So I think the best thing you can do with all this extra time is get some exercise in, take care of yourself, eat well, sleep well, don't stress it too much. There's gonna be questions on the boards. You're gonna have no freaking idea where it came from, and you just kind of gotta wear those on the chin. Other than that, from a actual tangible health standpoint, review the Pete as many times as you can. There's a couple extra academic Petes you can take. I think there's like 2 more. Maybe look at investing in those. I think those are the most helpful. I would probably stray away from. I didn't think Score Builders was very accurate towards the boards, and I think I'm going blank on what the third choice of company is, but I never did take that one. I think that's probably the most useful as far as like take your Pete, review the answer choices, and then just have fun. I go exercise, go get outside, eat well. I mean, I wouldn't stress it too much. It's not worth it.
Nick just is going to take some practice exams right now. He's freaking out.
He's
Got one scheduled for tomorrow already.
He's like, I've burned all my Petes. I don't know what to do.
No, man, I got one for tomorrow. I got one saved for tomorrow. Don't worry.
Really,
I'm
this
halfway
close?
through Score Builders right now, so that's reassuring.
Nick,
I
that's
like
like
some of the podcasts. I don't know if you guys have looked into some of the podcasts, like the Cal Rice podcast is a really good one. Just kind of takes your mind off of it. He's funny. It provides you with good ways to remember different things. So I feel like it's just a different way to study other than just taking more practice tests too, because I feel like those last few days are extremely overwhelming, and just like sitting there reading through your stuff for the 100th time isn't necessarily going to make it sink in. So I feel like, listening, trying to do other things, take your mind off of it, but doing like the podcast really helped me the last week or so.
Yeah, I think if you can get multiple aspects of learning, especially towards the end, because you're not going to be able to reread everything that you've written. You're not going to be able to reread the textbook. So if you can find other avenues to get information without overloading yourself at the very end, without feeling like you're cramming, I think that's super helpful. I know for me, I kind of stopped studying like 3 to 4 days before the test and really didn't look at anything. And it took a lot of self-control, which is something that I'm not really good at. But I think I was also kind of like burned out and kind of fed up with studying at that point anyway. So I was just like, you know what? Whatever I know. And if it doesn't go well, then I'll do it maybe differently next time. But Nick, it sounds like you're running a marathon a couple of days right before a marathon.
I mean, I've taken 4 tests so far. I took 1 Pete already, and reviewed that like 3 times so far. And feel good about it. I kind of did what Trey said, like know why things were right and why things were wrong. So I think that went well. I started looking at like some YouTube videos of stuff. So like that way when I'm thinking about a pathology, I can like actually see what was on the screen. And I think that helps a bit. Did some of those podcasts. I don't know, just trying to find different ways and hopefully something sticks.
Yeah. I'm kind of just messing with you. I think, everyone has their different ways of doing it. I mean, I guess I would say if the last exam doesn't go as well as you think, like don't let it destroy you though, just like move on as quickly as you can, and don't let it freak you out where the point where you're like studying all night long for the next couple of days.
I'll add this in. There's a study that came out on the Pete. If you pass a retired Pete, your likelihood of passing boards on the first try is 99.7%. So if you pass your retired Pete, honestly, I passed mine like December 30th, took boards January 29th. I spent 4 weeks just kind of lightly reviewing. I mean, you got to trust the research, be an evidence-based practitioner early on, and just go ahead and ride those stats there. If you fail the retired Pete, then yeah, you should probably freak out. You might want to figure it out quickly.
Yeah. Well, what's the statistics for failing the Pete, failing the first time exam?
The pass rate, if you fail the Pete, is 67%. So 33% shot. That's pretty good. I mean,
You could ride the odds.
Bad, yeah.
You could ride the odds a little bit. No, I think that's all really good stuff. I know that's a big point of stress for students and people studying for the board exam. It's really a monumental occasion going forward in your career. I think the majority of people do really well. Most PT students, again, like Trey said, you made it through PT school. You pretty much have a good idea of how to study, how to take tests. So you're most likely going to be fine. But it can be tough, especially with the added stress of all this stuff going on. One other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is something that we've been dealing with at Champion, is the elective surgery ban, I guess. So there's been no elective surgeries in Massachusetts for a while, probably 6 weeks. I don't know the exact date. But, how – and you guys all live in different states, so it's probably a little bit different. But I've kind of been struggling. Like, I've had some baseball players come in. It's like, oh, darn, these kids probably need an MRI on their elbow. Maybe they need to consult with a surgeon. And I don't know when they're going to be able to go in to see a doctor to get those things done. And it could be a couple months. And I totally understand the priority right now is public health and it's controlling the pandemic, whatever. But there's uncertainty in that as well. And in pro baseball, I would imagine you have some guys that are hurt, and I would imagine, I don't know, are you guys able to send them to the team doctor still, Brooks?
Yeah, our team physician, we still have a ton of contact with our team physician, partly just because we have to write up, we need plans for when guys come back, what reentry looks like, what testing is going to look like. So there's a lot of coordination with that just to figure out what that's going to look like. But on the other end too, we have a lot of guys who aren't here who are, hey, something comes up, where should I go? What should I do? And at that point, it's just kind of our network of physicians who, hey, this person was a fellow with so-and-so who's a specialist in this, here's somebody in your area that hopefully if you do have elective surgery available, you can go in and see that doctor. But it's really, it's a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, definitely is. Shelly, Trey, you guys have any experience trying to refer people to doctors right now? And how have you been handling that with the patient? And Drew, he's still on here.
A lot of our doctors just treated people through telehealth. So they still had people go and have MRIs, and elective surgeries just opened up 2 weeks ago for us. So we definitely had some people come in who their surgeries were delayed. I feel like if anything, it did give us a chance to do a little bit more prehab than we were beforehand, which was good. And I mean, sports aren't going to be coming back full term, really anytime within the next few weeks. So I feel like if anything, for some people, it was beneficial, but also, there were a lot of surgeries that were delayed that needed to happen when they occurred. So, I feel like thankfully our doctors did still somewhat treat telehealth through telehealth. And so I feel like that was helpful, but it definitely changed the dynamic some.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point that, there is still a silver lining in some of these things. If say you tore your ACL and you saw a surgeon before everything shut down and they decided that you need an ACL reconstruction. Well, now you have some time to really focus on prehab stuff, like getting the quad strong, range of motion. Maybe they go into surgery a little bit better than they would have if they had gotten the surgery earlier. It's probably a case-by-case basis for sure. But that is, one way to spin it to the patient, at least when you're talking to them, oh, I know your surgery got pushed back, but for you in particular, this could be a great opportunity to go into surgery even better than you would have, or we have time to work on some things that are going to set you up for success with surgery.
Even, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Even better, I read something one time. It's wondering, some of these people that couldn't have ACL surgery, I wonder if some of them started feeling really good and just opted for not having surgery. Because there's been some research on the non-surgical option of the ACL. I'd be curious to see anybody actually did that.
Yeah, maybe get some copers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess it would be like forced coping. Is that a term in the literature, like forced coping? I don't know. Maybe we can term that. Write a paper on it. Brooks, you're gonna head
COVID coping.
COVID coping. I like that. That's gonna be the trademark. Brooks, you're gonna head that research paper. Throw that on your plate right now.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Mike, just curious, what are you guys seeing up there as far as like furloughs and people getting laid off? Like, what's the job pulse kind of looking like in Massachusetts right now?
For PT specifically, so we were designated at the very beginning as an essential business. So that included outpatient, orthopedics, sports medicine, inpatient, obviously, home health, travel. All those things were considered essential. So people were able to continue to work. That being said, a lot of the outpatient clinics saw a really big decline in patient volume, particularly the outpatient sports medicine clinics. Champion was one of those clinics. Like we went from having 6 PTs, probably seeing 4 to 8 people a day, to just 1 PT seeing 3 people a day. So that's a dramatic drop in volume. And thankfully in our situation, Champion hasn't had to furlough any of the employees. We've reduced hours, and everyone's kind of been cut, but they haven't had to furlough us, which is a little bit of a different designation from an unemployment and benefits standpoint. But I think it's pretty widespread. And I was looking at some data before we got on here, and the unemployment numbers and the amount of healthcare workers that are furloughed is really skyrocketing. And obviously that's happening in every industry. And I think from what I could see is it's almost disproportionately affecting like SNFs and stuff like that, because they run on such small margins and small profit margins that when they start taking a hit and people don't want to go into that type of facility as a patient, they're going to have to furlough people. They're going to have to make drastic changes. But yeah, physical therapy, the majority of the industry, at least in the outpatient world, these are small businesses. Like these are, there are some big conglomerates that kind of buy up chains nationwide. But for the most part, it's a small business, maybe 2 to 3 clinics, maybe just 1 clinic. And so, the people have been applying for small business loans, trying to keep the doors open, probably furloughing employees at a pretty high rate. Now that we're starting to ramp up a little bit, our big message to clients is that it's safe to come into physical therapy. Like there are risks. Obviously, we're taking all the precautions that are recommended by the state. We're taking extra precautions with ourselves and with our clients. So there is always a risk, of course, but we're trying to minimize that risk as best we can. And I think that's an education thing. At Champion, we tend to see a lot of younger athletes whose parents are kind of in control of whether they come into PT or not. So it's more kind of demonstrating to the parents that we're doing everything we can. Have any of you guys seen like a big drop in volume, or has it been somewhat steady? Shelly, how about you?
Yeah, it's been a big drop. Thankfully, with elective surgeries opening back up, it's getting better, but typically we have 4 PTs, 1 PTA, and 2 techs, and 1 PTA, 1 PT, and both techs were furloughed. Thankfully, our numbers are up enough so that we've brought back the PT, but and then we have a tech that's part-time, but company-wide, it's been a pretty drastic cut. So it's been hard, but thankfully, honestly, we were able to utilize telehealth, and I mean, really, that saved us more than I initially would have thought. So thankfully, I was able to stay employed because of it. Not my full caseload was telehealth, but it was at least enough so that we could keep 3 of us PTs and then now bring 1 back. So, I feel like it's been beneficial for us as well as for our patients, but, overall it's been a pretty drastic cut.
Yeah. And are you in like a smaller outpatient clinic type of setting? Or are you guys owned by a larger chain?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with a corporate company, but we have one of the bigger locations nearby. But it is with a corporate company, and through all their clinics, I think there was a 20% cut in clinics closing. So it was a pretty big. There are a lot of the clinics close by that had to completely shut down. So we've gotten some patients from those clinics, but I think they're starting to talk about opening them back up. But generally, there is a pretty drastic cut.
Yeah, and I don't own a business personally, but I'm not envious of anyone that does own a business right now. It's got to be really tough making those decisions, and unfortunately, if you don't have enough, if you potentially can't generate enough revenue to keep the doors open, sometimes the best option is to furlough the employee, let them collect unemployment benefits, and then you hopefully bring them back when you're able to reopen. Drew, what about your situation? You don't have to go into too much specifics, but
we had a pretty major drop off, as you can expect, but we work full time. They want us to continue to work full time. We took a little bit of a pay cut, but we're kind of utilizing this time to better our, like I said, we're still kind of newer, so we're trying to better our processes a little bit. With dealing with the insurances and templates and stuff like that. We're trying to develop more of a sports medicine program too. So it's just kind of allowed us to add more stuff and better the stuff that we're doing. But yeah, the caseload dropped tremendously, as everyone can expect.
Yeah, I like that. Trying to use this as a time to build systems to hopefully help your business run a little bit smoother when you guys are back at full capacity. Brooks, what about in baseball? Any stories that you've heard in particular? I know obviously you guys aren't able to be there in person as often or at all.
Yeah, so big changes recently, with now a specific number of staff allowed at the complex, having to designate what your facility is going to be for training during this time, how many people you can have at the facility in terms of players and staff, what the testing will look like when every person gets to the facility, documenting when they're there, when they leave. So it'll be these next few days, few weeks will be a learning process for everybody. I'm really curious about in general, with clinics with outside of pro sports too, just all these youth sports coming back, you don't see as many injuries because they're not playing, but what the ramp up looks like for people coming back, not just in baseball and trying to time their workload right and how quickly they ramp up back to competitive play, but just for youth kids. And I think it's a huge opportunity for PTs to educate the public too. It's a great time if you're trying to establish a sports med presence in your area, reaching out to soccer teams and saying, hey, maybe if you guys aren't doing much right now, here's a FIFA 11 plus program. It's minimal equipment. You can give it to all your players and they can do it wherever they are. So I think it provides other opportunities for us, even without the caseload, and just more time to build other systems like you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great time for PTs to advocate for themselves. I guess, with sports being shut down, forcibly, I guess, obviously no one's playing sports right now. So we can use this time to try and help these teams out proactively, and try and prevent some injuries when they come back. And I think that's a gigantic role that we as PTs are fully capable of doing, to implementing those systems. And I think the general public doesn't really understand that we kind of do that. They think we just kind of treat people once they get injured. But we can collaborate with strength and conditioning coaches. We can collaborate with athletic trainers right now to put these systems in place for schools, for teams, to try and optimize either their training or their workload management throughout this period, so to try and prevent injury. I think that's a big role that we can play right now, and then we just need to advocate for ourselves and let people know that we can kind of do that. All right, well, how about Nick and Bo? What do you guys think the job market's going to look like?
Definitely worried about it.
Welcome to the working world.
Not good.
I mean, like, if you look historically, this is probably one of the first times that physical therapy has actually not been a safe job, especially like you guys were just mentioning with everyone being furloughed. Those are the people that are going to come back first. And then you're going to have this massive wave of new grads looking for jobs, and there's just going to be this kind of freeze. So I definitely think that it's going to be kind of a cutthroat race to come back once the finally opportunity comes. But yeah, there's definitely something in the back of my mind that I'm worried about, and I'm sure Nick probably feels the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's like you were saying, there's plenty of experienced PTs who are out right now who are going to potentially be competing for the same jobs you are. So I think it's just, it emphasizes the importance of trying to do things to help make yourself stand out. You know, you don't have the experience, but what are you doing to try and gain experience in different ways? Who are you connecting with to try and, you know, form these meaningful relationships, or who have you done that with in the past where, you know, I think you just got to lay some groundwork. I think that's a message for, you know, students earlier in their PT school careers, laying some groundwork and just getting out there and putting your face in front of other people's faces, and just trying to make connections as early and often as you can.
And I would say, for you guys, continue to reach out to people too, because no matter what, like if they're not hiring them off the bat, but they're going to be hiring. I mean, these surgeries pick back up and everything picks back up. PT 100% needed. So they're going to be hiring pretty quickly, I would say, even though they're going to bring those experienced PTs back first.
Yeah, Bo, when you were saying that, weird thought like popped into my mind. Obviously, when a company furloughs somebody, I believe that they have an agreement that they will bring that person back when and if they're able to. So that's the difference between laying them off and furloughing them. They'll also continue to pay their benefits when they're furloughed versus laid off. So those people are going to come back to those clinics. So those numbers are probably not as big as they may seem in terms of like the unemployment numbers in PT. But I would maybe make the case that some clinics are going to be looking to hire new grads over more experienced clinicians because they're going to pay you less. and they're going to save money by hiring new grads in a time where maybe they're financially hurting as a clinic. I don't know. That's just a thought. If anyone has any other thoughts on that.
I heard something recently that was interesting. This is a time when a lot of people are laid off and furloughed, so it does kind of open a door. If you weren't happy with your job beforehand, it does give you a chance to switch, look at other opportunities. So I heard that, you know, it may be this massive like switch and, you know, jobs opening and people trying to change jobs. So there may be more positions than you think.
Sounds like just a big game of musical chairs. It's like everyone's just going to be running around. I think it's definitely going to be chaotic. And, you know, looking at like the job projections for physical therapy, like our industry was projected to grow at a really high rate from 2018 to 2028. I think it was 28% growth in employment in physical therapy over those 10 years, right? So I think there's still hope for our profession. I think we're going to continue to grow. I think this is definitely going to be a blemish on the growth in the short term. I think in the long term, we're going to make a recovery. You know, for the people that are just entering the field now, in terms of just graduated, it may be a little bit tough, and you may not be able to be very picky about the first job that you take. Like you may have to work in a field that you don't necessarily want to spend your career working in. Like you may, if you want to work in sports med, you may have to work inpatient for, you know, a year. But there's a ton of experience to be gained from that as well. And then once you gain that experience, like you're a better clinician, and then you go work in sports med. So I think, you know, it may not be ideal, but there are definitely going to be opportunities for everyone. Dr. Trey, do you think you have the best nickname of any champion student?
Probably. I actually just started an Instagram live show last week, and I named it 30 Minutes with Dr. Trey. So I'm going to borrow Mike's nickname for me. But I just got off navigating the busy waters of COVID-19. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's pretty messy. I got started looking for a job through February and even through March. And I moved to Orlando, big city, like looked around, couldn't find much. I think we've hit this part where it's like we've opened so many schools in the past couple decades that I think we've hit max capacity. I think it's going to be time that we're going to have to get really smart with how we niche out and find really unique ways to deliver care. I don't think the standard outpatient job is going to be very glamorous anymore. I think loan to income ratio has hit a bubble. And at some point, I think all these big corporations are going to be offering 45 to 50 grand a year in salary with no bonuses from what I'm hearing from some of my classmates. So I'll be curious to see how everyone navigates it, but I think we're going to have to get pretty hardened and pretty smart to be able to navigate this. I don't know.
I know you, as a student at least, you had some experience working in the APTA or volunteering and kind of advocating. Anything? Are you still involved with that? And is there anything that you've been hearing through the APTA pipeline?
COVID almost made me forget about this, but when I went to the APTA meeting when I was at Champion, I walked in and this was like the payment policy forum. Within the first 5 minutes, they were like, guys, Medicare is cutting us by 8% and PTAs are getting a 15% cut. I kind of forgot about that actually. From the APTA pipeline though, they've been scarily quiet from a leadership standpoint. I know them, I like them as people. I think they've done a crap job as far as giving us insight on how to navigate this and giving us solutions for things. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, I like all of them, but I would tell them that I feel like they've been really quiet from a guideline standpoint. I've even seen, and I hate chiropractors, but man, the Chiropractic Association, they've put out some stuff about how to navigate it, keep business open. So I'd like to see more leadership from their part. But from what I'm hearing, I think we'll probably take corporates lead on things like the benchmarks and the ATIs and the big conglomerates. I think they'll probably get to kind of dictate the market for the next few years, which is temptress at best, probably not going to be too good, but I think we'll come out of it in a few years eventually, I hope.
What do you think the role of cash-based PT is going to play, given the fact that a lot of people are taking a financial hit personally, and it's the willingness to go to a cash-based physical therapy clinic going to drop?
That's tough. I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm in a cash-based setting, like kind of like Champion one-on-one, and we've seen a huge drop in people because, I mean, market boom, where expendable income's an all-time low. I think if you're smart with it, maybe you can advertise like, hey, we're going to reduce visits by doing one-off sessions. Maybe you get smart with telehealth, online programming, make ways. So for ACL post-op, I saw a study a couple weeks ago that the outcomes at 6 months for like a ridiculously low amount of visits was the same as 20 visits. So I think there's different ways to kind of navigate things and maybe make cash-based affordable. That's going to be a crap ton of consumer education as far as getting people to buy into that. But I don't know. I'll be curious to see, with everyone getting kicked off their health insurance too, with all the unemployment rates, cash-based may become more of a necessity even. And then obviously there's a 2020 election, Medicare for all swirling. Who knows? It's going to be fun to watch. But I think cash-based may come out on top or may just sink to the bottom. I don't know. But I guess ultimately, if you're offering a really great product like Champion does, I think you can make anything work, serving a really niche base. But you need people with dollar bills and a lot of education to make it work. So that's the tricky part about cash.
Yeah, I think you said it. What's that?
I said you got to have those golfers like you have with all that money falling out of their pants in the back nine.
The money bag golfers.
Yeah.
They're out there hacking it. There was almost a revolt in Massachusetts because like all the states around us had golf courses open, and Massachusetts was like one of the last to open up. And I swear, man, people were signing petitions. Like people probably would have sold their firstborn child to go play one round of golf. It's just like they're so crazy, man. And all athletes are like that.
Are you on the course with business cards yet, or what?
Man, I'm sending smoke signals. I got business cards. I'm making deals with the devil. I'm doing it all.
We need people to get hurt again. It's sad, but we need people to play sports and throw out their backs swinging on the 17th hole. But
yeah, they'll always be there. So yeah, So I think, we covered a lot of topics. If anyone has anything else they want to talk about, like definitely feel free. Just kind of throw it out there. Anyone?
I got something.
Hear it.
This would just be kind of advice for students. Something that I'm trying to do the best I can with right now. It's obviously a special circumstance, but I think it really kind of tests students that are still in clinicals right now to go that extra mile and try to do a little bit more education on your own because, you're not getting the same experience as you would have had things obviously not happen like this. But going the extra mile and just showing that extra initiative, like the coming in early or staying late or reaching out to other people, I think that's really big right now because the access is so limited. But at Champion, it's been a lot different because there are so many clinicians coming in. So I get to learn from everybody each day, which I think is a huge plus from some other cases where, you might have 2 patients a day with your CI and that's it at your outpatient or whatever. So I think just going that extra mile and trying to be diligent with your own education, putting it in your hands is really important right now.
I 100% agree. And one of the first staff meetings that we had at Champion, the real message was kind of no matter what happens, find a way to get out of this ahead. For the good chunk of time here, that meant online education and continuing ed through that avenue. And man, people are putting out a ton of content and they're putting it out for free. So the people that you look up to in the industry as students and as young grads and as experienced clinicians, they're putting a ton of stuff out there right now, and the majority of it's free or it's on sale. So if you have a little bit extra money and if you have a little bit extra time and you don't have the board exam in 6 days, start absorbing some of those continuing ed products right now. And that's a great way to differentiate yourself. It's probably a long-term investment versus the short-term investment, but it's only going to help you in your career. And this is a great time to kind of utilize those resources.
MedBridge is $10 for the year.
Get on MedBridge, promo code Lenny 2020.
Lenny 40.
We'll throw LenMac.
He posts that every day in Facebook somewhere.
Yeah, he's and that's a good revenue source for him. So potentially he didn't have to come into the clinic as much because he had those revenue sources and diversification as a PT, diversify your income. And we're all learning that the hard way. But if you can have alternative revenue streams, it's going to help make you a little more bulletproof for when the next pandemic kind of shuts down the entire world economy.
I think to that point and to Bo's point too, as a student, I wish I had spent more time learning how to make digital content, how to write blogs, how to make online things I could sell. I think that's something that maybe you spend a little less time studying on boards, try to figure out how to monetize the internet. And when the next pandemic comes, I don't know, I spent some money on Dan Pope's training program. So I know you guys at Champion do a good job of making your in-person education online format too, so people can benefit from that with pandemics, and you can make a little extra ka-ching on the side.
Yeah, definitely pass the board exam, and then you can become Jeff Bezos of physical therapy when you start taking over the world. All right, I think this is the part of Zoom calls, an hour in, where I just start losing my mind. But this is have been a really good conversation. But does anyone have a good Champion story? Brooks, I feel like you have a ton, but I feel like Brooks can't even share them because they're all bad. Anyone have a good Champion story that they remember from when they were there they want to share?
Mike, do you remember the day Ryan got yelled at for having the bag that smelled like a skunk or pot with Rich Hill there?
That was one of the worst. That was one of the darkest days in Champion history.
That was awkward.
We won't tell the whole story, but basically, I hope Ryan doesn't listen to this part. Well, it's been awesome having you guys on there. And I think, when you guys come and do a clinical at Champion, you're obviously going to do more shoulder manuals than you could ever imagine. probably more phase 2 manuals than you'd ever want to. You're going to do some hip manuals too, but like you're part of the champion family for sure. And we appreciate all you guys do. And whoever is watching this, these guys can do more than just read poorly grammatical, man, that's kind of ironic that I messed that up. But grammatically very poorly written sentences. So yeah,
Grammatically
these guys,
incorrect.
oh, the Duke student, of course, so pretentious.
Come on.
But yeah, thanks for coming on and sharing your experience. I think a lot of people are going to learn a good amount of stuff from this conversation. I learned a lot from you guys right now, so I think that's awesome. Bottom line, I think stay optimistic, and the profession as a whole, I think we're gonna get through this. It may look a little bit different, but I think overall we're gonna get through this and persevere. All right.